Hey guys, just wanted to let you know really quickly before we get started that probably a third of the way through filming this video, my mic cuts out. The wire was already like super frayed to begin with, and I just was pushing off needing to buy a new one until the last possible second, which in this case was when it totally cut out. As I'm editing this, I am getting used to it, but I just wanted to let you know because when it does happen, it is a bit jarring in the moment, and I wanted to assure you your speakers didn't just like lose half their quality. It's just my technology failings. So yeah, I will be getting a new wire, and the mic will be back in the next video in full throttle. Yeah, just wanted to let you know. Sorry, enjoy the video. Oh my god, it's been a journey trying to get this video to happen. I'm gonna be so honest. As I was setting up this video, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, unprompted, there's screaming. There's screaming occurring. And it's like somebody is being attacked. So I wondered, somebody drunk? And then they just get louder. And I had watched World War Z this past weekend. So, I'm on edge. I'm wondering, is this the beginning of forever? Brad Pitt is nowhere in my vicinity. I'm fucked. I pause everything and I grab my phone with the intention of whatever I'm about to witness resulting in me needing to dial 911. And it's a fucking kid, like throwing a temper tantrum right outside my building. And even though I am, high enough up, like floor-wise, to not be able to get the full picture of what's going on, I already feel in my gut that this is a case of gentle parenting, because the mom's just standing there stroking his face while he's actually, like, vile with his behavior. I obviously don't know the whole story, the whole picture. Hope everything's Gucci, but I am grateful that I took my birth control on time today. I think we also need to address that a mouse has died. There was a snowstorm last night, a lot of winter advisory stuff. A mouse, at least one, there could be multiple, I don't know. I don't understand the mouse culture. Came into this apartment building, into the walls, seeking refuge, seeking warmth. I don't know why he would do that. I really am only overwhelmed by one of those things. And it's not refuge, it's a broken radiator. But something must have gone amiss and he got stuck and he unfortunately passed. Unfortunately, the wall where he met his untimely demise is one of my walls. Gross. One of the walls that connects my unit to the rest of the building. He's rotting away. Life has run its course. But it stinks. It fucking stinks. I lived growing up in a house that was very old and had a pretty substantial mouse problem. And so I know from my childhood that the only thing that you can do is wait for the corpse to stop rotting, and then the smell will go away, because it just doesn't make sense to rip out a wall every time there's a bad smell when inevitably a mouse is going to get in. Yeah, not the childhood nostalgia I was necessarily hoping for here, but cool. But, the smell of death and rot is kind of a fitting atmospheric backdrop to this video. So, poetic timing and all that. Hi! Regularly uploading content? Who is she? This video is a little different from my others because it's planned. I kind of tried to replicate a makeup look that is a very loose interpretation of sort of what we're going to be diving into today. As I said in my last video, I have been wanting to get more into YouTube, creating things that bring me joy and hopefully in turn bring you a little slice of joy. And what consistently brings me joy horror movies. There is something about watching someone fall into a pile of dirty and used heroin needles, or seeing a demonic witch absolutely spider attack a innocent teenage girl from the top of their wardrobe that really sends me into a post-traumatic jump scare bliss. Horror movies have also always brought to me perspective, you know? Like, yes, I'm clinically depressed, but I didn't just kill Jigsaw's wife and have a permanent target on my back. There are worse things. And since in my own life I seem to be outnumbered, it seems to be normal people versus people who take naps to true crime. Only docuseries where the survivors have consented to tell their story, though. I at least have that going for me. But I decided that since in my own life there isn't a ton of enthusiasts, at least in my inner circle, that I would bring my obsession of horror to the internet to share with you guys. I have decided to dub thee with a very unoriginal series that I made up a few days ago called Decades of Doom. In each episode, we'll be going over and ranking pivotal horror movies of the time while also exploring their social and cultural impacts. Horror has been, in my opinion, forever a super underrated genre, and it seems like now it is finally getting the attention and care that it deserves. Horror movies have been undeniably getting better in quality as time has gone on, with, of course, a few exceptions. We will be getting into that. That will be a ways, however, because we need to pay homage to the roots, both sturdy and rotted. When I think about, in my own life experience, why people tend to avoid horror, it's because they don't like the feeling of being scared or grossed out, which, like, understandable. But personally, for me, where I differ, just a quick side note, I have panic disorder. I was initially diagnosed with panic disorder when I was 19 and a sophomore in college. The weeks leading up to that very relieving diagnosis, where I was just having multiple panic attacks a day prompted by nothing, and not really knowing what to do, how to treat it, what was even going on. I thought I had a heart condition. Horror movies were such an incredible outlet for me at this time, because after 90 minutes of clenching literally everything, I was left with a euphorically calm feeling. The feeling that many get when a panic attack has finally subsided. Whether it was I was having a panic attack in response to what was going on in the movie, whether it was just like a weird coincidence in time, it literally was like watching a horror movie help me release all the chemicals in my brain that were inciting this like unidentified, unspecified panic. And then after, I was just like, I left my panic on the horror dance floor. Murder my panic on the horror dance floor. Okay, sorry. Despite horror being taken less seriously at times than others, it's undeniably held its place as a proper genre ever since film was first invented. Which is why, what better way to start this series than to go through pivotal horror films of the 1890s. Okay, so before we get into discussing horror films of this decade, we should probably do a brief overview of how film came to be, just generally at this time. The birth of horror films is also very closely linked with the birth of cinema itself. Not sure if you count the world's first film of the train coming towards the screen that incited mass panic and riots, but like if you do, then horror is king. This was the decade where inventors Thomas Edison and the Lumiere brothers would first invent moving pictures, which would eventually make movies. Because film at this time is essentially crowning at the womb, these horror films are unsurprisingly in black and white, are silent, and usually no longer than 5 minutes. I'm really dreading the research I'm gonna have to do for the decades to come, because in comparison, I took up maybe like 15 minutes of my time, watching all the horror movies of this decade that I felt like encapsulated the, time period. So yeah, when we get to the 20s, if I'm a husk, you will, understand that there were more than 5 movies to review. The mid 1890s was the first time we saw moving pictures that were specifically capturing narratives concerning the supernatural, monsters, and other fantastical elements. And another reason I found during my research why this was so pivotal is because it was the first time where we were provided visual representations of our fear, rather than us relying on our own imaginations. There's obviously a debate about which one is more effective. Regardless of your stance on that, not needing to think about what a monster looked like made a monster popping up onto the screen all the more surprising and in turn terrifying. I should disclaim that in this particular video, I'm going to be a lot less critical of this decade than I will be in decades to come. And this is for a few, I think, very obvious reasons. It's the 1890s. I'm not going to be born for at least another 100 years. The filmmakers that we're going to be discussing obviously don't have at their disposal the technology advances that we currently do. So like, I'm not going to be ripping these guys to shreds for not using tasteful CGI. Also, another disclaimer before we get started. Sorry, but it's just got to be said. I am so clearly not a professional film critic. I don't know if you guys could have deduced that on your own, but just to make that abundantly clear. If you don't agree with this ranking or any of the rankings that I have in this series, that is a-okay with me. We're allowed to like what we like in whatever order we like. This is all just in good fun, very playful. If you want to follow along and just see what I think and maybe learn about the historical context, awesome. Great to have you along. Also, feel free to follow me on Letterboxd so you can see my movie reviews in real time. That's neither here nor there. Let's get started! So, starting off the bat, we have 1896's A Nightmare, or, in order to appease my Duolingo bird, Le Cauchemar. Also, another disclaimer, I am going to be reading the brief descriptions on Letterboxd because, frankly, it's way easier for me if I do it this way. In the film A Nightmare, a man has a fantastical nightmare involving, among other things, a grinning, malevolent moon. To the point. Now, one thing you'll notice for this decade, and arguably other decades that are going to be coming in this series, when I read you the blurb for a movie, I'm also therefore reading you the entire plot summary, because as we know, these were silent short films with limitations of, being 130 years old. Also, the majority of these films are available to watch on YouTube, and if they are, I will happily link each one down below. All of them are pretty short, so feel free to open another tab, grab a quick sneak peek or a snack, and then return for the civilized and tasteful, sophisticated discussion led by this snack. A Nightmare was directed by our first horror king, George Méliès. And there's a good reason why our pal George is going to come up a lot in the movies to come that we're going to be discussing. And it's because he was a pivotal filmmaker of the time. He was one of the first. He was there at the front of the line, determined to make a legacy for himself. And yeah, that legacy is racist. It's a sad fact that pretty much everyone in the 1800s with historical significance is gonna be racist. Not sure why that seemed to be a qualification for being remembered, but if nothing else, it's a very unfortunate pattern. There is rightfully a lot of debate around separating the art from the artist. I do think, in my personal opinion, as someone who, you know, has opinions about various art forms where there are lots of really shitty people who also made amazing art, that argument, I think, gets a little trickier and has a little more nuance to it when that person is dead. Like, you're not, you know, like, putting money in their pocket anymore because they're dead. And while I don't think that by any means like erase their problematic opinions and how they may have negatively impacted history via you know, offensive stereotypes that they allow to be portrayed in their films, I think both things can be true. I think, you know, George Méliès was a racist douche, but I think we can also acknowledge that, again, this is a very pivotal time and the birth of horror in a lot of ways. In addition to being one of the first to play around with visual effects, spiritualism was at an all-time peak craze in the 1890s. Seances and mediums conducting seances were reaching all-time highs in popularity in both Europe and the US. The film also explores the universal experience of a nightmare, something that, coupled with the anxious fascination with the supernatural, made this film as engaging and horrifying as it was to the public. And listen, the film has got some points. That moon is positively rotted to the core. Though entertaining and certainly impressive for its time, it is at the bottom of the ranking because racism. We can appreciate art while not supporting that shit on this platform. Also, the top letterbox comment to this film sent me into an absolute coma. It says George Méliès is 100% terrified of the moon, which, in addition to just being an amazing thing to say, also fails to be disproven. Runner up in fourth place, we have 1897's X-Ray Fiend. The film is about a romantic couple who are transformed into skeletons by X-rays. This one obviously isn't coming out the same year as the birth of cinema. Cinema has only been around for a year. Classic Lost Generationer. This movie paved the way for a ton of horror tropes that we still see today. For instance, it was one of the first to introduce practical special effects like superimposing images, which is arguably more realistic than some of the CGI I'm forced to look at in this day and age. While the X-Ray Fiend wasn't directed by Méliès, it's actually by George Albert Smith. This movie's visual tricks influenced a ton of filmmakers, including George Méliès, and it was this fascination with the filmmaker's ability to trick the audience while kind of just using practical effects of what you had at your disposal. Playing smarter, not harder. It also addresses technological anxiety that we see now all the fucking time. Since X-rays were a novelty at this time and most people didn't really understand what they were or what they did, this film literally preys on that curiosity by turning it into fear through making it the worst possible outcome, like invading your personal privacy, invading your personal body. X-ray walked so AI could run. So for being as impactful as it is, why is it at number 4? Truly just because I was more entertained by the other ones. That's literally it. World's shittiest movie critic is happy to be here sitting in front of you today. All in all, it's quick, it's funny, and it's cool to see one of the first traces of societal critiques regarding technology. Also, it's obviously higher up than A Nightmare because A Nightmare is racist. In third place, we have 1896's The Haunted Castle. Ah! Hi! Always gotta make an appearance, you know? Hello? Please don't scratch the chair. Oh my god, it's literally 6 p.m. and I'm like ready for bed. Do you wanna come sit? Oh my goodness. Good girl. Bye. Off she goes. Catering again to my Duolingo bird. Le Manoir du Diable. Also impressing my Duolingo bird with the exact translation technically being the Manor of the Devil. Guys, I'm fluent in French! The haunted castle goes like this. In a medieval castle, a dark magician thought to be Mephistopheles conjures up a series of bizarre creatures and events in order to torment a pair of interloping cavaliers. To be completely honest, in terms of historical context and major filmmaking waves, this film isn't that different from Méliès's A Nightmare in terms of spellbinding visual effects and catering to the public's current obsession with the supernatural and the spirit world. Difference with this is it's long. I feel like you honestly get to see all the elements you appreciated about the other movies even more in this one, just because we get more time with them. The effects are impressive and immersive, and I feel like we're more invested in the journey because we're just in the world for a longer period of time. This film definitely gives hints to what to expect from longer formed horror in decades to come. Third place, because even though Horror King George is racist, this is still an impressive feat. In second place, runner-up to, in my opinion, the crown prince of 1890s horror, we have 1899's The Devil in a Convent. King George on the big screen once again. Le Diable au Couvent. The Duolingo bird is always watching. The Devil in a Convent is about a priest who is officiating at a convent when suddenly he is transformed into the devil, who frightens away the nuns and turns the place into pandemonium. We're now at the tail end of the 19th century, and I feel like we can see Georges Méliès further developing and maturing as a filmmaker in this one. Thematically, he's taking a stronger stance on the supernatural by incorporating religious themes into this film. Having the literal devil on the screen was not something the public was necessarily ready to digest, which then sparked a lot of controversy, and surely one of the first instances of all press is good press in regards to film. Because people were going wild about this movie. It was also one of the first visual representations of the devil, in regards to being on a moving screen, so you can imagine the hernias that occurred in the theater. Nothing was a greater representation of nightmare fuel than seeing your greatest fear move around in real time and do the world's first TikTok dance. You can also just already see a major shift in quality in this film. The cuts are smoother, there's more attention to detail in regards to costumes and choreography. All in all, it does give this more grown-up and attentional approach than we've seen in Méliès's past films. Second place, threads are being pulled together for the works of Problematic George. Now, when you go on Letterboxd and filter through horror movies based on earliest release, this bitch is at the front and center. I'm not going to confidently state that this is the first horror movie ever made because there's a lot of debate that sparks what is officially considered a fully made film at that time, but for the sake of me not pulling out all of my hair, we're going to take Letterboxd word as God in this particular on this platform. A terrible night. Une nuit terrible. A man tries to get a good night's sleep, but is disturbed by a giant spider that leaps onto his bed, and a battle ensues in hilarious comic fashion. This film came out in 1896, and you all can roast me all you'd like. I found the special effects for this film compete with some CGI we see today. That roach, absolutely detestable. And capturing its movements in a film that is on its way to being 140 years old is super impressive to me. Mind you, this is one of Daddy George's earliest works, so you gotta hand it to him for having a specific vision in mind and the determination to see it through. This was also one of the first infusions of humor in horror, which leaves audiences feeling entertained and also discombobulated in a really effective way. This kind of paves the way for campy horror to kind of come to fruition. One of the first instances of film kind of playing with the audience's emotions and leaving them in a state of unrest about how and what they should feel, which, considering this film is a minute long, you gotta give it chops for making you feel that much within such a short period of time. Impressive special effects, committed acting, playful yet thoughtful storytelling, These are all elements that have motivated me to label this film as my personal favorite horror film of the 1890s. Joyful yet confused claps all around. Yay! I know I obviously didn't rank every single horror film of the 1890s, so if I missed one of your favorites, a unique thing to say, I feel like, just feels strange in my mouth. Please feel free to leave it down below in the comments. And friendly reminder to keep it respectful. This is all in good fun. Thank you so much for watching if you have made it to the end. As always, this video was super fun to make. I love giving professional and well-researched film opinions that nobody asked for or can argue with. Feel free, if you enjoyed this video, to give it a comment, a like, subscribe. Let me know what your ranking would be, and if there are any movies you want me to review for when we get to the 1900s. Generation that birthed queens. Thanks. Bye.